Yes, you did.
It's hard to walk in the dark. So if you're going to walk around in the dark, you would need a flashlight or a light.
Your eyes. Your eyes. Your eyes and your butt.
Yeah, they'll adjust a little bit. You know what? The Bible even says so. In Isaiah, it says, "The people who walk in the darkness have seen a great light. For unto us a child is born. To us a son is given." Who do you think that is?
Jesus.
You're right, it is Jesus. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." Just like a flashlight lights our way in the dark, Jesus lights our way through life, and he lights the way to God the Father. A flashlight helps us keep from stumbling over things in the dark, and Jesus helps us from stumbling over problems in our lives. By the way, this is my favorite flashlight. Brett lets me use it sometime. It's so bright that when I turn it on, I have to put on my sunglasses. It's like crazy bright. You guys are going to have to just kind of, don't look directly at it.
Why?
Because I don't want it to burn your retinas. It's really super, super bright. On 3, I want you to turn it on. Okay, be careful. Don't look directly at it. It's like a solar eclipse, you know. 1, 2, 3. It's not working. What? Here, tap it or try it again.
Is this part of your thingy, Madoodle?
Oh.
There is no batteries in it, I know
Yeah,
it.
maybe check that. How did you know there was no? Did you take the batteries out?
There's no batteries.
I took them out.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Well,
I just knew it.
I guess you can't always depend on a flashlight, can you? But you can always depend on Jesus Christ. He is the light of our life and the way to the Father. And because Jesus is the light of the world, we love him. Should we pray? Father in heaven, thank you for sending Jesus, the light of the world. We pray that he will always light our way in life and light our way to you. We thank you in his holy name. Amen.
Now Bonnie's going to read to us from John.
As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud, and I put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said.
His mother named him James, but everybody but her called him Jim. Jim was born blind. He had a congenital defect called bilateral microphthalmia. Now, when Jim was growing up, life was hard. Blindness was misunderstood and almost impossible to get a real job. So Jim was forced to beg on the street, hold out his cup, and wait for the generosity of others. Now, there are people in Jim's neighborhood that knew him, which really is to say that when they saw him, they recognized him as the beggar on the street. His parents, of course, knew him, but they had their own life to live, and so they kind of left Jim to his own devices. I've traveled a lot of places in my career. I've seen a lot of Jims. It doesn't take long. Big city, man standing along the side of the road with a cup in his hand. In fact, you don't have to go very far from this building to see a Jim or two. Right? They stand out along the highway and they hold up a sign. So today, we are continuing our sermon series on the Gospel according to John. And this week we're taking on chapters 8 and 9. Okay? In chapter 8, Jesus is defending himself from the church leadership and has to deal with some pretty harsh characters as they attack who he is. They question him and question who he really is. Now, it's a pretty good story, and it's a story that really teaches us about judging others, lest we ourselves be judged. Right? It ends, actually, the book of John 8 ends with, it ends with a group of bullies who are really trying to kill Jesus. Right? Just because Jesus stands up for himself. And they don't like that. Now, you'll have to read that story to know the end. That's not what the sermon's about today. But if you read that story, I assure you that the way Jesus handles it is really good advice for handling bullies. In chapter 9, we meet the blind beggar, whom Bonnie read about this morning. Now, we really don't know if his name was Jim or not, right? And we don't know what his modern diagnosis would have been. We know he was blind from birth. And in Jesus' day, blind from birth meant a life of begging. That was the only profession you could have. So if you think of this story, that was read this morning, if you think of it from the perspective of the blind man, right, the story might go something a little like this. I got up this morning, same as most mornings, made my way to the street where I work. There's a good place to sit next to the wall so my back doesn't hurt quite so much. They're good people. They're very generous. The other day, I got enough to buy a full loaf of bread and some scraps of meat from the vendor down the street. It was getting towards the end of the day. My cup is pretty light. And I hear them coming. Several men walking down the street. And I got anxious. Maybe. They were near enough I could actually hear them. And I knew in an instant they were talking about me. I'd heard it all before. Rabbi, one of the men said, who sinned this man or his parents that he was born blind? A sigh escaped my lips before I could even stop it. I'd heard that question from so many people. I wish I knew the answer. My parents were good Jewish citizens who believed in God and followed the laws of Moses. We did not know why God was punishing me with this affliction. But then the teacher's answer to the question surprised me. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said the man they called Jesus. But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Okay, now let's pause the story for a minute. I'm used to doing that with my DVR. Pause. And let's kind of look at it from that man's shoes, right? If you put yourself, well, probably sandals, right? He was probably wearing sandals, probably wasn't wearing shoes. But if you look at it from his sandals point of view, right, here come a group of men up the street. Odds are good that at least one of them will be generous and put something in my cup, right? So you sit up, you're a little hopeful. And then just as quickly you hear them talking about you. And it's that same old depression that starts again. You know the sadness that's filled with what is your life. But then this roller coaster ride isn't over. Right? Rabbi or teacher just said it wasn't your fault. He said it wasn't your parents' fault. The teacher said God had a plan for you. He had a plan for you, the beggar on the street. And he does. He has a plan for you, and he has a plan for me. So let's continue the story. At this point, all of the men had stopped. I could sense someone leaning down close to me. And then he spit into the dirt right next to me. Well, the natural reaction was to pull back and recoil from the sound. And I did just that. I was now a little afraid of what was going to happen to me. And then he touched me. He touched me on the arm so as not to startle me. His hand was warm and kind, and I was no longer afraid. He touched my face. He wiped mud on my eyelids. It smelled of straw and animals, and I knew it was where he had spat. Go, the man said. Wash in the pool of Siloam. Now I knew where this pool was, but I rarely traveled to the southern part of the city. It was a fair distance from where I laid my head and the street and where I worked. But I stood, and I made my way as best I could. Okay, pause again. So again, in the sandals of the man, a group of men, you really can't tell how many, but it's got to be more than 10, are walking down the street. They stop in front of you, and one spits in the ground, rubs mud all over your useless eyes, and says, "Go wash up across town." I'm not sure my response would have been, "Oh, okay." Right? I think the man knew. I think he knew there was something special going on. That there was something special about this man they called Jesus, rabbi, teacher. I think when Jesus touched him, he didn't just touch his eyes. He touched his soul. The story continues. As I washed my face in the water, I saw my hands for the first time. I saw my reflection in the pool. I looked down and I saw my feet, and I knew that I'd been healed. I made my way back home. It was strange and wondrous. When I got home, my neighbors saw me walking down the street, and they could tell that I could see. It started as whispers, but soon they were no longer quiet. Isn't that the man who used to sit and beg? No, I could not only feel them staring at me, I could see them staring at me. Some of them knew it was me, while others said, "No, he only looks like him." I stood in the spot where I normally sat and begged, and I tried to convince them that it was really me. I am the man, I insisted. How then were your eyes opened? They demanded. So I told them my story. The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go wash. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and I washed, and then I could see. Now, honestly, as I heard myself say it out loud, it sounded a little crazy even to me. Where is this man? They asked. I thought for a moment and said, I don't know. Okay, final recap. Stranger stops by, rubs mud on your face, tells you to walk across town and clean up. You do. And for the first time in your life, you can see. You go home and people ask you what happened. You tell them, but really you don't know who the man was or who helped you or where he can be found. Sound familiar? We are the ARK United Methodist Church of Southern Union County, South Dakota, United States of America, North American continent, Northern Hemisphere, Earth, solar system, Milky Way galaxy. Kind of puts us in perspective, right? And to us, the ARK means acts of random kindness. Today's story is the ultimate act of random kindness. From the beggar's point of view, this was totally random. Somebody just walked up to him on the street and healed his blindness from birth. From Jesus' point of view, from his perspective, the quote is, this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. And of course now in ours. We don't know how old the beggar was. Later in chapter 9, it actually talks about his parents coming, and they mention he is of age, meaning an adult. So this man has been blind since birth to adulthood. And to fulfill his destiny by being healed by Jesus on the street so that we might get the message. But the story of the beggar doesn't end there. No, the man's neighbors, the ones who questioned him, they took him to the Pharisees to seek answers to questions on how the man who was blind from birth can suddenly see. Now, the Pharisees are this legalistic kind of separatist group who strictly but often hypocritically keep the law of Moses and the unwritten tradition of the elders. Their name, Pharisees, meaning separated ones. They number about 6,000 and were spread all over Palestine. They were teachers in the synagogue, religious examples in the eyes of the people, and self-appointed guardians of the law and its proper observance. Now, it's important to the story that you understand that the day Jesus made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Saturday. Not a big deal to you and me. But in Jesus' day, in the Jewish tradition, according to the laws of Moses, Saturday is the Sabbath. It's a holy day, and, well, nobody works on the Sabbath. That came from Moses himself, and Moses brought that from God. Nobody works on the seventh day. So now when they bring him to the Pharisees, well, I kind of like this part, so I want to read it out of that comes from the book. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him, how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such sins, such signs?" So they were divided. Okay, it's kind of the pause button again. You're one of the neighbors this time. A man in your neighborhood suddenly can see. He's been blind since birth. He suddenly can see. You go to the smartest people you know and say, "Can you tell me how this happened?" And their response is, "Oh, well, he did on the Sabbath. That's bad. Obviously, he's no good." Did you miss something? There was a miracle there. I have a 15-year-old. And I won't pick on him too much, because he really is a good kid. But don't tell him that, right? Because it'll just go to his head. But when you're 15, you know for a fact that you are right. And if you have little brothers and sisters, you know it is your duty in life to teach them these facts that you know. And if mom and dad might have an opinion that differs from these facts, well, that's not even worth listening to. Because I'm 15 and I know the facts. Now, I wish this phenomenon was limited to teenagers. It's not. I'm really probably as guilty as not listening as anyone else is. Especially when my emotions are running high and somebody thinks it's a good idea to push my buttons. Right? So the Pharisees are blinded to the truth because Jesus has the audacity to heal a man on the Sabbath. I'm guessing their emotions were running a little high. They keep questioning the former blind man, and frankly, each other. Right? He's a sinner for breaking the Sabbath. Well, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? They question whether the man was really blind. They actually brought in his parents. Is this man your son? Yes, he's our son. Was he really blind? Yes, he was blind. Finally, the blind man, kind of in frustration, says, "Hello, miracle. Did everybody miss this part?" The Pharisees are ticked. They end up so frustrated and so mad, they kick him out. They kick the blind man out of the church, of the community. They excommunicate him. He's gone. Clearly, there's something going on. People often fail to see the truth that is right in front of their eyes. This is demonstrated in the 1989 film Field of Dreams. Remember this? Right, Jeffrey, you're a little young, but Kevin Costner plays Ray Kinsella, an Iowa farmer who builds a baseball diamond in his field so the ghosts of the 1919 World Series can come back and play baseball. His extended family thinks he's crazy. Here's the clip.
Ray? Honey, Mom and everybody's leaving now.
Well, it was, thanks for coming.
Ray, think about what I said. And I'm just trying to help.
I know.
So I thought you two were going to watch some game.
Because it's not really a game, it's more like a practice. See, there's only 8 of them, so they can't play a real game.
8 of what?
Them.
Who them?
Them. Well, you don't see?
Karen, honey? What are you watching?
The baseball man.
Baseball? Do you see the baseball man right now?
Of course I do.
But you really don't see him?
I don't think it's very polite to try to make other people feel stupid.
Mom, wait a minute. Mom, wait a minute. Dee, but you don't see these people?
It's not funny, Annie.
They couldn't see it.
This is really interesting.
Really interesting. Ray's mother-in-law says, I don't think it's very polite to make other people feel stupid. The reality was they were missing something incredible happening right in front of them. Ray wasn't trying to make them feel stupid. They were doing just fine on their own. I wonder if that's what the Pharisees thought. These people are trying to make us feel stupid. That's why they got mad and kicked the man out. But Jesus and the blind man weren't trying to make the Pharisees look stupid. No, the Pharisees were doing a good job of that all on their own. So it is with us. How many times are we blinded to those around us? To the miracles that God puts in our path each and every day, so that we may see Him work. We find them annoying, bothersome. We become rude and insensitive because we are so caught up in our own problems that we fail to see our God right in front of our nose. What do you see? This is audience participation time. What do you see? A black dot. Right? Does anybody see anything other than a black dot? You can look really close. It's not the best dot. It's not the roundest dot. Right? Does everybody agree that you see a black dot? Yeah, what about the piece of paper? You missed the piece of paper? Nah, everybody saw the piece of paper. You just overlooked it because you're focused on the dot. Right? We do that. We do that a lot in life. We tend to overlook and take for granted the many wonderful things that God has for us because we focus our attention and energy on a small dot of failures and disappointments. The so-called problems that we usually have are kind of like the black dot on the piece of paper. Small and insignificant. And we need to widen our horizon and look at the big picture. The book of John, the 4 Gospels, in fact, the entire New Testament, has story after story after story of the miracles of the man we call Jesus. Jesus walks with us each and every day. And Jesus performs miracles each and every day through us. We are not only the receptacles of his love, we are the instruments of it. I challenge you this week to go perform acts of random kindness. And when you do, look around. Look around and see Jesus and his amazing, grace-filled life. If you perform just one act of random kindness this week, I know you will see Jesus walking with you. And the little black dots of doubt and problems will start to fade away in a brilliant white light of grace and love. Amen.